Astra rocket launch. The flight was terminated about 2.5 minutes after liftoff. The third try wasn't the charm for Astra. The company's LV-0006 rocket tilted and slid sideways a moment after getting off the ground in Alaska, which Astra CEO Chris Kemp told CNBC was due to one of its 5 engines shutting down. The rocket did not crash immediately, recovering from the issue and continuing to accelerate for more than 2 minutes. The rocket was off course at that point, however, and the launch safety team shut down the rocket's remaining engines and terminated the flight. LV-0006 reached an altitude of about 164 feet or 50 kilometers, with Astra yet to have a rocket successfully make it to orbit. Astra is investigating the cause of the issue, with Kemp saying that the company collected a tremendous amount of data from the flight and is in the process of reviewing it. Shares of Astra fell 18.7% to close at $9.49. The California Bay Area startup attempted its third orbital test flight today, August 28, sending its 2-stage launch vehicle 6 skyward from the Pacific Spaceport Complex on Alaska's Kodiak Island at 6:35 p.m. EDT. The rocket suffered an anomaly about 2.5 minutes after liftoff, however, and the flight was terminated. Something appeared to be wrong from the beginning, as Launch Vehicle 6 lurched sideways at the moment of liftoff rather than rise smoothly off the pad. But the rocket recovered and soared high into the Alaska sky, reaching an altitude of about 20.5 miles before shutting down, according to real-time data Astra provided during a webcast of the launch. The mission was terminated right around max Q, the point when the mechanical stresses on a rocket are highest. A camera mounted on Launch Vehicle 6 appeared to show a piece of the booster breaking loose around that time. Although we did not achieve our primary objective today, our team will work hard to determine what happened here, Carolina Grossman, Director of Product Management at Astra, said during today's launch webcast. And as we dig into the flight data, we are optimistic about the future and our next attempt. The 43 feet tall Launch Vehicle 6, a member of Astra's Rocket 3.3 series, carried a test payload for the U.S. Department of Defense's Space Test Program today. That payload was a mass simulator, not an operational satellite, so it was not meant to be deployed. Astra originally tried to launch this mission on Friday, but Launch Vehicle 6's guidance system called an abort shortly after engine ignition. Engineers troubleshot the problem, which turned out to be an engine configuration issue, and got the booster ready for liftoff a day later. Big plans for small rockets. Astra, which was founded in 2016, aims to claim a big share of the growing small satellite launch market with its line of mass-produced, low-cost, ever-evolving rockets. The company's launch system is designed to be highly mobile and responsive. Its rockets, for example, are transported to the launch site in standard shipping containers. In many ways, the engineering that goes into a car is more than what goes into a rocket, but they're able to make cars for tens of thousands of dollars. Astra co-founder and Chief Technology Officer Adam London said in a Q&A that the company posted online Friday. "You don't find any rockets today that are that affordable," London said. Astra was put together to figure out how you bridge that gap, how you make lots of rockets, so people can leverage easier and faster access to space to do great and interesting things. Astra had launched 2 orbital test flights before today, neither of which carried a payload. In September 2020, the company's Rocket 3.1 suffered a guidance issue shortly after launch and came crashing back to Earth. In December of that year, Rocket 3.2 reached space successfully, but ran out of fuel just before attaining orbital velocity. The company spent some time upgrading its next booster variant, Rocket 3.3. Astra addressed the fuel consumption issue and boosted the performance of the upper stage, London said during a webcast of Friday's aborted launch attempt. The new variant is also 5 feet taller than Rocket 3.1 and Rocket 3.2, he added. Additional tweaks to Launch Vehicle 6's successors may be coming, based on what the company learns from its investigation of today's anomaly. Initial analyses show that one of the rocket's 5 first-stage engines failed about 1 second after liftoff, for reasons that weren't immediately clear, Astra co-founder, Chairman and CEO Chris Kemp said in a short post-flight briefing this evening. As Launch Vehicle 6 burned fuel during its sideways slide, it became light enough to be lofted by the remaining 4 engines, and the rocket began to climb, Kemp said. But 2 minutes and 28 seconds into the flight, the launch range issued an all-engine shutdown command, terminating the mission, he added. The rocket reached an altitude of about 50 kilometers, and we returned back with no injuries or damage to any property and collected a tremendous amount of data from the flight. Kemp said, "It was obviously not successful at putting anything in orbit, but it was a flight where we learned a tremendous amount of obviously things we need to look into as we prepare to return to Kodiak and fly again." He added, "Astra will make many trips to the launch pad in the coming months and years, if all goes according to plan. For example, today's launch was the first of 2 booked by the U.S. Space Force. The second was expected to lift off later this year, though that timeline could end up shifting a bit." Astra holds a number of other contracts as well. The company has signed deals for more than 50 launches that together represent more than $150 million in revenue, Kemp told Space.com last month. Among those contracts are agreements to loft Earth observing satellites for San Francisco-based company Planet next year, and to launch NASA's TROPICS mission. TROPICS will study the formation and evolution of hurricanes using 6 CubeSats, which Astra will launch over the course of 3 missions between January and July 2022 from the Marshall Islands Kwajalein Atoll in the Central Pacific. And over the long haul, the company plans to ramp up its launch cadence to an unprecedented level, potentially transforming humanity's access to space. "Our next objective is monthly, then weekly, and finally daily space delivery," London said in the Q&A. "It's a little nuts," he added, "but if you have a satellite in orbit and it fails, you need to put another one back there quickly. Or if you want to launch a constellation of thousands of satellites, you don't want to wait 6 months between launches. Our idea is by launching a few satellites nearly every day to precisely where they are needed, you can have a constellation deployed in a year or 2, rather than 5 years." Astra, which became a publicly traded company this summer, is also developing its own satellite bus. These spacecraft will sport electric propulsion engines built by Apollo Fusion, which Astra acquired earlier this year. How Astra stacks up in the launch industry. SpaceX's Falcon rockets, which are used to haul large satellites, batches of satellites or NASA astronauts into orbit, stand at more than 200 feet tall, or roughly the height of 4 of Astra's rockets stacked on top of each other. The idea behind companies such as Astra is to create smaller rockets that haul less mass into space, but can be built quickly and cheaply and launched agilely. Astra is one of dozens of companies that plan to use lightweight rockets to make frequent trips to space to drop off satellites. When asked in a company Q&A posted online how Astra plans to stand out in such a crowded industry, Adam London, Astra's founder and chief technology officer, said, "Rockets are typically artisanal, crafted objects. You make one at a time, and they're very complicated. But when you really get into it, they don't need to be that complicated, particularly when you're not flying people or critical national assets. And they don't absolutely, positively have to work 100% of the time." In other words, Astra plans to mass-produce rockets to make them cheaper, and it doesn't put too much emphasis on having a pristine success rate. Thank you for watching. Don't forget to subscribe to the channel. See you in the next video.